Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all ships at sea. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you an important message from the Prepared Mind Network.
Oh!
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. We got a lot of good stuff to talk about, folks, but we got some big news about what's going on in the world of social media, you know, the information war. I've been following reports of this over several days, getting information from different sources, from Gab, from Rumble, from news agencies, and some of the important things that have gone on. Well, before we get to those, let's kind of back up a little, shall we? What we've noticed over the last couple of years is a desire by big tech, by mainstream media, and by the political elitists in Washington, D.C. to silence opposition. And they've labeled anything that they disagree with, or rather anything when we refuse to agree with them, label it as misinformation or in some way fake. Right, the entire meme of fake news is rather insulting, I think, to me, because I think you could get 5 people to watch an incident firsthand and then ask them what happened. You'll get 5 different explanations. I mean, perspective, I guess, or the way you think would tend to dictate how you viewed such a thing. Well, because they disagree with our views, we must be silenced. So there's been a call, and it's been a long call, for something to replace Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, these massive social media giants and their backers in the big tech industry world. So we've been waiting, and Gab has been doing what it can do, and Rumble and BitChute, they've been doing what they can do to gain some power, some market share. And it's there's a lot of even I think within this sector, a lot of misinformation, and I think it's being done by the powers that be. I think they're the ones causing trouble. But some very interesting developments have happened, and I think it is big news, because this is an information war. If you were to step out on the street and look around, there's no bullets flying, not right now. If there's no police actions going on, not right now. Basically, what we're seeing, though, is it's an information war, a psychology war, a psyop. And so the big development I'm talking about is Representative Devin Nunes, who is a Republican from California, someone I've cited on many occasions as being a staunch conservative or a staunch constitutionalist. He has now resigned from Congress and has become the chief executive officer of Trump's media company. Now, that's pretty big news, one for a congressman to leave his cushy government job, where I'm sure all of them feather their nests quite well, to pick up this job. So it seems to be a real move, a big move, because I would think that Trump's social media platform, whatever shape and forms it takes, is going to be centered, right? It's going to want to be free speech oriented, because that was his complaint. It would be terrible if he opened up a social media empire with his own version of censorship. Of course, you know, it would be rather funny to say, we don't allow communist anti-American speech. But then what is anti-American speech? Well, I mean, I know what it is, but people could argue that, you know, arguing for communism is pro-American. And while I don't agree, I'm sure the argument would be made by someone. All that said, Devin Nunes resigning from Congress to become the CEO, if that's true, I haven't seen a retraction from that news story, then that is a big deal. No one leaves a honeypot for a pot of sand. I guess unless it was Ilhan Omar, someone else, you know, who's completely brainless but this came up later in the day, and there's an email out from Gab, and Gab is another social media site that is a Christian, and they say they are not for sale to anyone at any time. And they're not particularly fond of what Trump is doing, and I can understand that. But Rumble has announced later in the day a distribution deal with Trump's Truth Social. So it's looking like, according to the news article, that this partnership between Trump's Truth Social and Rumble looks like it's going to take a direct, pow shot at YouTube. And what I've said all along is they have, right, it's a big animal to go after. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of network hardware infrastructure, right? So here's a little piece from the article. Over the past year, Rumble has grown an extremely quick pace, with the company having reached 15% market share among U.S. users, according to Newsmax. So 15% of the, I'm assuming, video news, unless they're just talking about 15% of overall video platform, social media video platform. Any way you look at it, that's a pretty good chunk. Now, the article says that Rumble has been successful by championing themselves as a staunch pro-free speech platform. But most importantly, they have refrained from censoring content like YouTube and others. Now, my comment on this is they need commercial advertising. They need to attract creators, and they need to attract talent. Right? That's what they need to have. YouTube and Google have AdSense that puts ads, runs ads. It creates a revenue stream for everyone involved. It makes the sites, in order to host this commercial content, it gives them an air of professionalism. And they get more, the more professional a website looks, the more hits they get or views, the more ad revenue they get, right? The stronger everyone's platform, the better the creator content, the more people will be attracted who come and then come back again and again and again. It's one of the reasons that we have here at the Prepared Mind, we've stepped up our production value. And while right now I'm, in the prepared bunker, right, just kind of hanging out here, this is what I do. I usually appear in a t-shirt. I have at times in the past worn my sports coat and nice shirt, worn my glasses to make sure I read everything A-OK 110%. And we're waiting, folks. Now, while I have done that in the past, gotten all dressed up, right, we do have the ability to create newsroom quality appearance. I don't know if that's going to be what the audience demands, but it is always a potential. And just to kind of give you a little look at it, just a little look-see, I'm going to give you a taste. Now, while that was just a little promo piece that Mr. T put together, we can do that sort of thing. Now, again, this is an information war that's being fought. And I'm telling you, you need to be prepared, first and foremost. Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense, and a plan. We all need that, right? But this is an information war. And it's good to see that Trump is moving forward. And I sure hope they get the commercial advertising, the commercial revenue, to attract creators and talent, and then afford to pay them so they can afford these high-end services, this big tech, to make it look more professional. And there's people that do it. They buy the software, they do and put in their own infrastructure. But how are we, you and I, as preppers, as patriots, as Americans, how are we going to convince people, right, to think for themselves? That is the second part of this, is the amount of brainwashing and damage that's gone on in this propaganda war, this psyop, which has defeated the thinking in at least 50% of the population, right? Through attrition, through beating them down. And let me give you a quick rundown of what other countries are doing right now. Over in Russia, just today, Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, and Xi Biden, president of the United States government, had a virtual conference. And while the meeting itself was private, Russia decided that they would televise the part where Biden couldn't seem to figure out his equipment and fumbled with the mic and screwed around, basically making the United States look incompetent. Now, that is, when you're talking about the president of the United States, you're talking about the power and might and majesty of all of our big tech and big media powerhouses. It's amazing how, even with all their know-how, experience, and money, they don't look any more professional than us little YouTubers out here. So again, I really do welcome President Trump's efforts, and I hope that they work out. And again, I have a lot of hope in this, because we have, like I said, we're seeing more, we're hearing more about more money being raised. And they need advertising revenue. They need it. They're going to need a lot of help. They're going to need real professionals. It's interesting to see that Devin Nunes is stepping in as CEO, because Trump is saying he's going to want to run for president in 2024. We've got a lot going on in this war, folks. This shit is the fan debacle that is just continuing to develop. Continuing. Now, let's switch gears a little bit. This is the afternoon Q&A. And what I want you to do is get your questions into Jolene. And at the bottom half of the hour, we'll start with you guys. But I still got over 15 minutes for myself. And I want to let you guys know that we've ordered our promotional limited edition Prepared Mind shirt. And I want to give you guys a peek at it. They're going to be available in large and extra large. They're going to be available in maroon red, royal blue, forest green, and black. And this is what they're going to look like. The little circular patch over the front chest, and then the old fuck around and find out with an oversized, easily distinguished Kyle Rittenhouse silhouette. Then it says, get prepared at the club, right? And get it at thepreparedmind.club. That'll be a great shirt. It looks like we're going to have them just in time for Christmas to be over. As soon as I get them, though, we'll be selling those directly. And so, if you order them, they would be mailed out right away. We'll have more information on that in the near future. And again, I want to congratulate everyone and thank you for 8 years, 8 years of the Prepared Mind. Okay, with regard to Putin meeting with Biden in a virtual meeting, it's really looking like there's going to be conflict. The Soviet Union fell; it collapsed 30 years ago. That's right, folks. Communism died in Russia, the Soviet Union, 30 years ago. They had 70 years to get it right, to make it profitable or productive or prosperous, and it utterly failed. Communism utterly failed. Well, Putin has basically been in charge of Russia ever since then, and I think he's done a fantastic job, but essentially there was the belief that the old Soviet Union and then the Eastern Bloc, that is Eastern Europe, would remain kind of a neutral ground between the West and Russia. What Russia is very upset about is the prospect of Ukraine becoming a NATO member state. Essentially, that would be for us like Mexico becoming a close ally of Russia and then saying, why don't you move some Russian and Chinese air bases and military bases into the country of Mexico? Right? We had a giant fit, the United States did, during the Kennedy administration way back in the early 60s, when Nikita Khrushchev put a bunch of nuclear missiles in Cuba. That was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And eventually, Kennedy was able to say, hey, look, we're going to do some things to make you feel safer in Russia, and you're going to do some things for us, right? You're going to get your missiles out of Cuba. And they both were happy. They both claimed victory. They both pulled out and diffused that situation. Putin is looking for something similar to that, is my understanding. But, you know, there's a big push on the NATO side. Right? Their general is talking a lot of shit. And it looks like Biden is going to be the spokesman for common sense in this. Folks, it's a scary situation. Putin is saying, look, if you guys don't get the hell out of Ukraine or Finlandize the Ukraine, whatever that means, basically make it neutral ground, that he will come in and do it himself, right? He is going to reserve the right to act first. And that's pretty interesting. Pretty scary stuff, folks. We could end up in a conflict, a limited conflict, at least Europe. It's in a big position of standoff. We were looking at the Middle East as being the target or trigger for World War III, looking at the South China Sea with China and Taiwan. But we've got this now. And Biden is not really the spokesman for NATO or the United States. He is a puppet. He really is. He doesn't have what it takes, folks. And Putin knows it. Putin will push him around and make him look stupid. Putin made Obama look ridiculously stupid, as well as John Kerry, which, of course, a lot of us really enjoyed. Anyways, folks, Russia is heating up with the Ukraine issue once again, and a lot of nervous people out there. Now, Russia also controls a huge amount of the energy that's being distributed into Europe to keep their houses warm and keep their factories open and working. And they could pull the plug on that. And this is what happens when you have a world where you trust somebody to supply you with the goods you need, and then you think you're going to tell them how to run their business. China does the same thing with us. We have to get our goods from China. And boy, look at how people dance to their tune. And it's no wonder that shit has hit the fan on so many different levels. Economically, energy-wise, militarily. I hope you're prepared. Now, kind of breaking it back down to some smaller pieces that we can digest, right? I just showed you guys our new Prepared Mind shirt that'll be coming out. We've also got a shirt that's coming out that'll be marketed through YouTube. But this shirt here is, it's going to be a dry fit sports shirt, athletic cut. So it doesn't make you look like a rotundo, unless you are a rotundo. I'm no longer a rotundo, so it'll be nice to have some really cool shirts. And then again, it'll be a limited edition. We're only going to print up 48 of those shirts. 48. Well, we'll get there. So Kyle Rittenhouse, well, he got kind of shit on by everyone on the left, including basketball genius, right? No, he's not a genius. Let's see. He is an athlete. LeBron James, right? He tweeted and made fun of Rittenhouse and his courtroom appearance. And Kyle has been out there in the public, and he was asked directly about that. You know, what do you think of LeBron and what he said, and et cetera. Kyle said, you know, quote, I liked LeBron, and then I'm like you know what? Fuck you, LeBron. That's just wonderful. This kid doesn't need LeBron. In fact, I don't think anyone, right, needs LeBron. And I bet if LeBoner, I kind of like LeBoner better. I bet if LeBoner was being attacked by multiple left-wing lunatics who were threatening to kill him, beating at him with a skateboard, pulling a gun on him, I bet LeBoner would want someone just like Kyle there to protect him. You know, it's always easier to talk shit from behind a keyboard or a phone It's easy to rely on your celebrity, when you're picking on someone like Kyle, and hey, I pick on people. I get it. I'll call them on their shit, and people call me on my shit all the time. It's just interesting how this all plays out. And it is, folks, playing out right now. And discussing what is going on with this political game playing out, again, on a more local level. The January 6th protesters, they're still in jail. And one prisoner, Jessica Watkins, says, "I have been incarcerated for nearly a year for crimes I did not commit." Understand, folks. Understand, if they can silence you, they will. YouTube, Twitter, etc. And if they can arrest you just for the mere appearance of a crime, they will. And then to make an example, the way they've made an example of the Special Forces congressional candidate down in Florida, who I believe is still being held in jail, and many, many others who are now political prisoners. They're conditioning America. They're conditioning the population to this being okay. The same way they're conditioning everyone to accept mandatory lockdowns, mandatory masks, and mandatory Jim Jones juice. Anyways, with regard to political persecution, that reminds me of an old Humphrey Bogart type statement, "You'll never take me alive, copper," right? There's a lot of people that are going to have that attitude, because once they got you, habeas corpus, not so much. We've got January 6th protesters. They were arrested shortly after January 6th, and it's almost January 6th again, folks. Being in jail for a year, not even committing a crime, getting no trial, being falsely accused, sounds a lot like 1774, 1775, and 1776. Wow. Where do we go from here? I think I want to talk about some Jim Jones juice. I really do, folks. Jim Jones juice.
Patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, their patience is wearing thin. But let me tell you, we've now got a report that has shown nearly 300 folks, professional level athletes, have collapsed or suffered cardiac arrest after taking their Jim Jones juice. I'm surprised they haven't made that stuff illegal. Imagine if I canned up. I put in cans Jim Jones juice and sold it at stores, sold it at supermarkets, sold it at stadiums, and people were taking it and collapsing left and right. Imagine if, there were that many people. Imagine hundreds of thousands of people suffering, enlarged heart, having strokes, having embolisms, passing out, collapsing because they're drinking a beverage called the Jim Jones juice. Imagine that, folks. What would go on? You think there would be reports? Yeah, now you've got athletes out there and celebrities. And every time you turn on the television or even the radio, you can't go 5 minutes without tripping over an advertisement saying, "Go get your shot. Go get your shot," right? And making you feel guilty or stupid or trying to persuade you or buy you or bribe you. They've got everyone pushing this. But if I went out there and had Jim Jones juice in a can and people were collapsing and dying, how long do you think that market would stay on the shelves, or that product? Not very long, folks, but nearly 300 athletes, famous, extreme super athletes, collapsing and suffering. Now, that's not counting those who just have other shall we call them, injuries, right? How about, you can't use your limbs or your fingers. Eric Clapton, one of the world's most famous guitar players, been around playing the guitar for well over 50 years, lost control and use of his hands, right? So he wrote music, came out and said, hey, no more of this shit. And then he was attacked. You cannot oppose them, folks, without being attacked. You can't say anything, other than, hey, Dr. Fauci, he's the smartest guy ever. Boy, that little guy sure is brilliant. He's been around for 40 years, doing everyone a big fat favor in the fields of research he's done. Well, I want to bring up what's going on in Vietnam, where we really are selling the Jim Jones juice, right? At least 3 children have died, and 120 children have been hospitalized in Vietnam after receiving Jim Jones juice. Isn't this interesting, folks? According to the province's Centers for Disease Control, 120 children were hospitalized after experiencing symptoms, like nausea, high fever, or breathing difficulties after taking the Jim Jones juice in a can. Isn't that interesting? And 17 out of those 120 experienced severe reactions. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that amazing? Right? Now imagine if I went to a school district and handed out 10,000 cans of Jim Jones juice and 120 kids got hospitalized. Do you think they would continue to push me selling my canned beverages? I don't think so. I don't think so, folks. But they're going to continue to push that. They're going to push their war narrative. They're going to continue to push their anti-American bullshit. They're going to continue to say that parents are terrorists in the United States. They're going to continue to lock people up in Australia. They're not giving up on this. They're not going away. You need to get prepared. And then when it happens, folks, I can't wait. But when it happens, it's going to be wonderful to see President Trump come up with a real social media system that clobbers the shit. Now, he better take a fucking page from Fox News, pardon my French. But Fox News used to claim to be fair and balanced, and it is anything but. They have shown that they bow to Soros, that they kiss the ass of the bureaucracy. They've shown that. They've demonstrated it. And they failed. They screwed over America over the 2020 election by not covering it properly in a fair and balanced way. Trump better take a page from their manual on what not to do. And if he's going to allow free speech, do it. If he's going to allow patriots on there, make sure they're patriots. And I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of softballers, and I bet there's going to be a bunch of people that really want to talk some trash, some serious hardball guys. But they're all going to have to be there, and they're going to have to compete for space and time. And that's really what we do right here is I'm competing with you for time in your life to talk to you. It is incredible, folks. And Leanne and others, I want to thank you out there for sending me news and saying, hey, this is an hour-long video. I hope you can watch it. It's like, oh my God, I don't have a minute, much less an hour, but I try every day. I spend just hours and hours pouring through this information so I can bring to you condensed, vital information to help you get prepared. Got to be prepared first. Got to have all those items in your house and then the prepared mind. Then look out and say, what's happening in the world? And are we ready? It's really what it comes down to is, are you ready? Are you prepared? And I really hope that Trump's system is real and that it is fully funded. And so Jolene and I will be keeping a close eye on that. And so will everyone at the R Syndicate. The R Syndicate is your clearinghouse for all things prepper, and that's run by Uman. And I want to thank Uman for all he does out there behind the scenes, working with you guys, working in the chat. But the R Syndicate is a site that has, it's our own version of a library of prepping that Uman has put together. All right, we're back, and guess what? We've gone past the 30-minute mark. It means it's time for the Q&A, question and answer. And again, thank you all you. Now it's your turn to ask questions. Direct the show, and let's see what you want to talk about. See what you've seen out there. I may have missed it, or I may just not have gotten to it. Let's see.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we are. Jolene, what have we got out there? We got something from Jay Clifton. We're going to kick it off here. He says, I love it. John did another good gad. It's gear time. That was awesome. Thank you, John. Cool. Do as many as you can, brother. What did you use in those jugs that looked like Jell-O? He's referring to the Christmas fest. In all truth, Jay, it was Jell-O. So it had a lot of nice, bright, jolly Christmas colors, greens and yellows and reds. That was fun, just giving the old hollow points a test and blowing Jell-O all over the place. And I'm sure the local ants enjoyed the Jell-O dessert that they had that evening. Anyways, it's been fun all of these years doing this. And it would be more fun if the business wasn't so serious. And it is serious business, folks. First and foremost, get prepared. Now, I would love to throw humor and fun. I love to be sarcastic and a big smart ass, because it's kind of basically what I've been my whole life. But, it is serious information, serious content. And I'm a very serious person, and I'm also like to be a very humor-filled person. And I'm not all death and destruction, but I'm aware of the risks. And this world that we're in is not one that says, hey, we want you to have a good time, John. You do what you want. Anyways, get your questions into Jolene through the comment section, and we'll talk about some more. And we've got Mikey G. And he says, Russia is speeding up production of hypersonic missiles. Now, he's correct. The missile systems. Now, if you just think about missiles, they go very fast. As a human being, we can't do anything to stop them. They're traveling 400, 500, 600 miles an hour, I guess. Look out, right? These things will get you. So they came up with some Patriot missile systems and the Iron Dome system and these ways to thwart the traditional missiles. Well, hypersonic missiles have been developed in Russia and now China as well. And hypersonic, meaning they fly multiple times the speed of sound. You won't even see them coming. And that's the trick with these. How can you shoot something down that you can't even see? Even if it's coming from a great distance, right? That's going to be the challenge. And look out. So Russia has something that there is no defense for. And they have now stepped and ramped up production. How would, the United States government, or how would European governments feel if Russia started selling these weapons to, Libyans, Turkey, right? Moroccans, Mexicans, Central Americans, Cubans, where are these missiles going to show up? This is a deal with American armaments, American defensive weapons, or you could call them offensive weapons. They're sold around the world by our government, or they're sanctioned to be sold by our government. Our advanced weapon systems. Well, Russia has some extremely advanced. And that should give the United States government and the puppet masters pause, because Putin doesn't appear to be playing by the rules, the same rules everyone else is. That's why he's now being threatened by Biden with sanctions. That's right. And Biden doesn't seem to understand, or maybe he does, and he's just pretending like it's no big deal. Russia has sold. They are no longer buying U.S. bonds. Right? They don't have confidence. They've backed out of buying U.S. bonds, meaning our country has to go somewhere else to get that funding. Well, they've just decided they're going to print money. So I guess we don't need Russian Russian efforts to buy. Same way China said, you know what, we're going to sell off our U.S. bonds. And so we're stuck. This country is stuck, folks. Russia's got its hypersonic missiles. It's had its own economy. It works and operates independently of the SWIFT system, which is a money exchange. Russia's been treated very poorly. Trump was trying to create a stronger relationship between Russia and the United States, maybe similar to the way China has a relationship. China just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than Russia. They have a bigger population. They're strategically closer to our Pacific interests. But look out, you want to mistreat Russia. They are not weak. Right? They're not small. They're not supposed to be as powerful as the United States, but look what the United States military has become. A bunch of fishnet wearing, lipstick wearing fruitcakes at the Pentagon. It's not a good look in the world of ass kicking. All right, let's move on if we shall, though. Yeah, hypersonic missiles, don't forget about it. Russia's got them, and they're able to sell them if they want. We got Steve, USMC, no tolerance, semper fi to you, Steve. He said, well, it's after 4 p.m. and Biden hasn't gotten us blown up yet. That's a win in my book, but the day isn't over. Laughing out loud, LOL. And Kyle will be on Glenn Beck's show tonight at 8 Eastern. Tune in for that, if you will. Kyle Rittenhouse doing the media rounds, as stated before. He's basically said about LeBron, fuck you, LeBron. No one needs your shit. And he's not very entertaining as far as I'm concerned. And watching a human being toss a round ball through a hoop. Oh boy, how good is that? I prefer ice hockey myself, guys skating around, hitting a puck and beating the shit out of each other. That's a sport. But, basketball, it's kind of lost it. Anyways, let's stay on target with Kyle, and then I'll get to Sally Sue's question, which is just glaring at me off of the screen. Kyle's going to continue to make the rounds. He's going to sue the ever-loving shit out of mainstream media, news sources for slander. There's a lot of people who have used their undue influence and just come out and said he's a white supremacist and he's a murderer and all other things. Look out. One of the good things about being a small nobody like me is I got nothing to sue me for, right? Even this property I'm on right here, I don't own it. One of the great things about keeping all of your wealth, well, not having any, and if you do have some, I definitely recommend putting it into a irrevocable contract trust. That's not legal advice, it's just some thoughts. You can't take what I don't own, and I don't own this, but I do have the benefit of living in it. Anyways, let's get to that big question by Sally Sue. Thank you, Jolene. And Sally Sue asks, can you speculate on what a war with Russia would look like? In all truth, right now, folks, we are at war with Russia. It's an information war. It's a cyber war. We're at war with them already. Supposedly, Russian hackers are constantly trying to get into our infrastructure, our private businesses, our banks, etc. I really think that in a lot of ways, that is the CIA and other agencies using, shall we say, ghost IPs, internet addresses, the same way we use VPNs, you and I, VPNs to protect our identity, where we're at. They can put a ghost one out there and pretend, right? They can hack European sites. Oh, you remember that thing where Angela Merkel, Chancellor of Germany, you remember when the Obama administration, I believe, was spying on her? And it was like a big, whoops, sorry about that. But moving beyond an information war and a cyber war with Russia, what would an actual physical war look like? It would be a very ugly situation. Now, I'm not aware of all of the targeting systems that these hypersonic missiles have. Are they for ground targets? or are they for air targets, meaning would we have an air offense against Russia? It's my guess that a hypersonic missile can be locked onto a jet, a bomber or fighter jet, very effectively. And as quickly as they move, it would be like you trying to dodge a bullet, right? And it's not Matrix time. There's no being an airbender and flipping and flopping and having bullets miss you. There's only a few of us that know how to do that. And, and it ain't that easy. So I would suspect that if we had a physical war with Russia, that there wouldn't be much in the air. There wouldn't be much in the air. I do know that modern avionics, even back when I was a jarhead, they had ways to scramble to hide themselves in the air. But it's a much different world today, and I'm not really aware of all of those, shall we say, defense techniques, right? Countermeasures, if you will. But I'm sure they're there. Now, would Russia be able to fly into and over war zones, contested areas, without risk? Of course not. Even standard missiles. So if the air is done, and we're going to rule out nuclear war, because the implications of one nuclear missile being detonated over any city anywhere on the planet opens Pandora's box of ultimate death and destruction. Nobody wants to see that. The same goes for electromagnetic pulse weaponry. If that was being used, either satellite version like in the GoldenEye James Bond movie, or ground-based interference, say from the HARP systems, or missiles that were tipped with EMP producing weapons, that would be really, it would open up an entire barrage. And that really is a big question as well. What kind of war, what kind of a conflict would we see? We could survive an EMP war. Kind of. We could survive a limited nuclear exchange, but it wouldn't be nice. So what would war look like with China or with Russia? War is never pretty, and civilian casualties are usually what is produced in order to give the enemy the necessary will to surrender. So it comes down to, shall we say, boots on the ground battlefield tactics. Well, if we're not going to nuke each other, and we're not going to use EMPs, and the air is going to be a dead zone, well, would Russia be launching hypersonic missiles at ground targets, taking out air bases, strategic manufacturing, maybe IT or internet infrastructure sites to basically deafen and blind? Once again, you take away the internet and people can't function, governments can't function. Individuals can't function, businesses can't function. We can't communicate, you and I, without the internet. We would have to revert to our phones, our cute little ham radios and CBs and the like, ham radios, shortwave. It's a whole different world when we get to that. Right now, the airwaves are pretty much packed with everything. Will we lose our cell towers? So if we ended up with a ground war, now we've got tanks and personnel crossing the ground. Now let's just assume the war is started because Russia's like, you know what? If you think we're going to allow Ukraine to become a NATO member, and then you're going to move forward air defenses into it, forget it. That's basically what they're saying, is we don't want missiles on our border. We don't want a military right on our border. We don't have to tolerate that sort of continuous threat. Once again, very similar to the United States telling Khrushchev, hey, look, we've discovered you have nuclear missiles in Cuba. That's just a little too close for comfort. That's right. So Russia's having the same type of thoughts. So what if they were to roll into Ukraine? Well, a couple of years ago, if you recall, they rolled into the Crimean Peninsula and said, you know what, that's really not part of Ukraine. That has been a part of Mother Russia for a long, long time. So we're just going to take it back. Just going to take it back. And they did. They could take Ukraine and say, this isn't happening. And I will say this, I have no doubt that there is intense political pressure from Russian political interests, as well as European political interests and American political interests inside Ukraine. I believe that's what a lot of the conflict was about a couple of years ago. It's not just going to go away. This is going to persist. It's going to continue. There's going to be threats. And if military action breaks out, it's probably going to be Russian tanks, armored personnel carriers, and they will roll on the capital of Ukraine and say, it's not going to happen. Now, if they possess Ukraine, then I guess next they would say, well, wait a minute, Poland is a NATO country now. Poland used to be a communist subsidiary state, if you will. And that was, the communist aggression moving towards Europe. And that's where the Cold War was kind of fought. Well, if Ukraine falls into Russia's hands, literally, then what is Poland going to think of that? And what is Russia and Ukraine going to think of Poland being a NATO ally, a NATO asset right there? Once again, will they demand then that Poland demilitarize or Finlandize, as Putin says? Or will Putin just accept that that is the hard line, but Ukraine was just too close? And if they do roll in with troops, tanks, armored personnel carrier, ground units, and occupy Ukraine, will the rest of Europe, NATO, and the American military cabal, will they say, hey, we can't have that? Right now, for the United States of America, we're on the other side of the Atlantic. We aren't nearly as threatened as Poland and the Czech Republic. It is really, folks, land wars in Europe. Sheesh, how many hundreds and hundreds of years has it been going on? To think that it can't happen again and that it won't happen again is basically nonsense. What we have here is a failure to communicate, though. A failure to think intelligently. Now, if there's one thing Putin can do, that is think intelligently. I'm having severe doubts and misgivings about the thinking of the Biden administration and the powers that be that control him, as well as the thinking of Europeans. European leadership in the EU said what? Well, we ought to just throw out the Nuremberg Code and officially mandate everyone get the Jim Jones juice, whether they like it or not. That's right, folks. There's some lack of thinking going on here. Who are the lack of thinkers? There's a huge consequence to pay, folks, for ineptitude and lack of intelligence. There always is. Making a mistake is one thing. Not clearly hearing something is one thing. But intentionally being a complete moron always has negative consequences. I guess we're going to find out. Now, I know I kind of rode that horse for a while, and I think I've gotten the point across. It would be a boots on the ground conflict. How much everyone gets to get involved, though, that is up in the air for now. Now we got Cat Got Your Tongue with a question. Said, would people in Alaska and northern Canada, due to proximity, be at a higher risk of invasion if Russian and U.S. war escalates? I don't think Canada needs to worry. The deal with using the North Pole as the quickest way from Russia over to the U.S. or the opposite from the U.S. into Russia was over ICBMs, nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's the shortest way to get from one country to the other is over the top. And so we had our early warning radar systems up in Canada and Alaska but they weren't really there to stop. They weren't really there to stop a ground invasion. A ground invasion, sailing somehow across the Arctic Ocean wouldn't be the brightest thing, or the Arctic Sea. Is that a sea or an ocean? Anyways, sailing across that, not too good unless you've got an icebreaker for troop carriers and such, and then marching across 1,000 miles of frozen tundra is not the sneakiest way to approach your enemy. Alaska is a little different, being that it's right across the Bering Strait from Russia. The eastern coast is a long way from Moscow. And if troops were being piled up in Vladivostok, Russia, we would get to know about it and hear about it. And I'm sure the Army would be on full alert in Alaska. I don't think that they are at great risk. And the reason is holding real estate is a big deal, right? Wars are about acquiring real estate. It's just not using an agent and the typical, I'm here to buy your real estate. It's more like, we now occupy this, and might makes right. In order to win a land war, a conventional war, you need to occupy useful territory. You need to stop the enemy from being able to fight back. So you try and attack their infrastructure. You attack their means of resistance. You demoralize their people. So a lot of the typical things you would do in warfare, demoralizing people, fucking up their infrastructure, keeping them from communicating, that can all be done electronically. And it makes me wonder how much the Chinese and the Russians know about our systems. How many backdoors and passwords do they know where they can get in and use cyber warfare to attack and degrade our ability to respond? And ultimately, it does come down to men facing each other with rifles saying, I'm going to kill you. Right? So if Russia wants to invade the United States, they're going to need to take the West Coast, and they would want to probably invade the East Coast. Now, taking the West Coast, I think, would be easier because it's further away from Washington, D.C. And every country, although it pretends to be sacrosanct and universal in its love for all of its constituents, typically they're most worried about their capital, their home base. So Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon, that is what they are most concerned with. It's not that they're not concerned about the West Coast, it's just they don't care as much about it. The same way Moscow doesn't really care as much about Vladivostok as they do about Moscow and Minsk and their east or their western edge. It's going to be interesting though, folks. Is there really going to be war? I don't know. We got Jay Clifton back. He says, hey John, I was in our local very small store in our small town, and a guy tried to steal beer. As he went for the door, 3 of us pushed him down, and he said to have a seat until the sheriff came, and the sheriff told us, thank you, and do it again anytime. We just went from the macro, talking about Russia and the United States, and Mike makes right, to the micro on our individual level and basis. Yeah. Today, you try and steal beer, you're going to get knocked on your ass, and the sheriff will come and get you. If we're in some severe shortages, right? We got some Mad Max going on. I think looters or thieves are going to be treated quite differently. So if there had been more of a, shall we say, life and death consequence for someone stealing something from someone, I think the consequence or the penalty is going to move a lot closer to that of the death penalty. Right now, yeah, you steal some beer, we're just going to arrest you. When shit hits the fan big time and there's shortages and people's survival depends on things that are being stolen, probably be the death penalty. All right, we got Heidi checking in. Heidi. And she says, Yesterday, I sent you an email about a nurse explaining the 3 different flavors of Jim Jones juice. What do you think of it? Regular, decaf, and extra pumped. Here's what I think. I think that they do have different strengths, different varieties, and I think that they probably put them out regionally. Now, again, I'm not an actual distributor of Jim Jones juice. I'm not an expert in the areas of beverage chemistry. I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you that we're seeing different things around the country. We're seeing different things around the world, how people's bodies are reacting. When I discussed what happened down there in Vietnam with these 120 children, it's like, wow, why did so many have serious reactions and have to be hospitalized? That's not counting mild reactions, folks. I mean, today I feel a little bit under the weather. I feel kind of groggy, kind of dizzy a little bit. And I don't like it a bit. It kind of pisses me off, feeling less than 100%. I can't imagine drinking a can of Jim Jones juice and feeling shittier afterwards. What I would think of that. Being hospitalized would be even worse. Right? And I guess if I just died from a freaking heart attack, I wouldn't know any different because I'd be dead. But any way you look at it, what's going on is bad. There are different versions, I think, different, shall we say, potency levels. I don't like any of what they're doing. I think they're targeting certain groups, and I think they're testing certain groups. I know that the area I came from in California, at the beginning, there wasn't much of anything going on, and now I am hearing about a lot of people getting sick and dying. And I'm starting to hear reports that people's immune systems are failing. Now, they're anecdotal at this point, but there was a British undertaker, a funeral director, and he's noted, and he did a Twitter release, and he said, hey, look, he says, we're the ones that end up dealing and disposing of these bodies, holding funerals, preparing embalming bodies, for burial. And he came out and said, there's an awful lot of heart attacks, strokes, and the like that people are dying from. A lot more than normal. So that is not a normal situation. Right? Not to mention the ages of people who are having heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms, blood clots, major blood clots that kill them. That's not normal. And he said that number's gone up. Now, I don't know. I believe his information was also anecdotal, but he said, we're noticing that people, and I think we're all noticing this, but the information isn't being gathered and compiled and filed away and released through mainstream media outlets, that people who got Jim Jones juiced, who are fully juicinated, it's fascinating, after 6, 7, 8 months, their immune systems seem to be getting weaker and weaker. And then they're starting to succumb and not be able to fight off things like the common cold. Now, I took that information. I said, you know what? This unicorn variant, people are saying, well, it's basically a cold. Could that be what's going on? Is people are getting the common cold, and it's now no longer just the sniffles or a little head congestion, but rather it's acting more like a flu, not because it's anything life-threatening, but people aren't able to fight off the common cold the way they used to. It's all really kind of interesting. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see. In the meantime, I won't be taking any Jim Jones juice, not a fucking chance. All right, we got Blue Cord Devil checking in, and he says, Lord Inslee said the other day he isn't going to follow the science. You're just going to do what I say. Thoughts? Lord Inslee can kiss my ass. And if I was anywhere near his state or his jurisdiction or his realm of authority, right, I would tell him the same. You can kiss my ass. But that's really where this is going. See, the science that I read is saying Jim Jones juice, bad idea. don't do it, right? That there are very negative consequences. And now they're like, you know what? We don't care what you think. We don't care about your science, right? In fact, science is what Dr. Doom says it is. The little Felchmeister, it just is what he says it is. And so you're just going to do as they say. That's where they're really pushing this, folks. I think they're going to find a way to try and lock us down after Christmas. I think in a lot of areas, in a lot of places, especially places like Texas, Florida, other southern states that are more free, I think that their efforts are going to fail. I think that states like Arizona and Missouri and Tennessee are going to say, you know what? I don't think so. In fact, there were 8 states total, right in the center of the country, 8 states of the United States of America that never, ever, ever locked down at all, period. And they proved that it wasn't necessary, that it did no good, that it had no negative effect on them, that the lockdown efforts were, bullshit. And it turned out to be, folks, that it has harmed our nation, our liberties, our freedoms, the way government functions and thinks of itself, the way law enforcement functions, the way first responders and emergency people function, the way hospitals function. They've screwed the entire country up, and they want this. They want this great reset. It's going to be tough. It ain't going to be easy. I'm glad I'm where I'm at, and I'm surrounded by good people. I hope that you are too. But, it all starts at home, being prepared. Food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. Have a plan. Understand that 10-mile radius around you. Who is in it? What do they intend to do when things get really nasty? And we're being told things can get really nasty. Let's just say Russia rolled, folks. Say Russia rolled into Ukraine. And they shut the power off on the east coast of the United States and then blamed Russia and said they launched an EMP. How would we know the difference? Hell, how would we know what's going on anyway? We lost our power. Right? Are you prepared? Are you prepared? Godspeed. Semper Fi, folks, and I'll be back very, very soon.
Ho, 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 ho!